All right, everyone. So we kind of talked about what a microinteraction is. Let's talk about some sort of best practices when it comes to applying them. And then we're actually going to learn how to create them using Figma, which we've used before to do sort of digital paper prototypes. So here's some just kind of best practices with microinteractions. You want the microinteraction. So one is just keep microinteractions natural. What do I mean by that? Well, there has to be sort of a cause and effect. In other words, like, here's an example. If I put my cursor over an application icon, this is the Mac OS X, what they call the dock, notice that it gets larger, right? And it kind of makes sense. I put my cursor over it, and then that item that I put my cursor over gets larger, right? Let's imagine hypothetically that I put my cursor over it and it suddenly jumped to the other side of the screen. That's still a micro interaction because something happened. It's still, there's still feedback, but the feedback is confusing. You would go, well, why is it jumping? Is there a glitch in the system? Is there a reason why it's on the other side of the screen? Is the other side of the screen important or something? So keeping the microinteractions natural is part of it. So it's like, if you click on something and all of a sudden it changes. Like, imagine if I clicked on an icon, like, let's say I clicked on this icon and it suddenly changed from a plus sign into a skull, right? Like, as humans, we're going to go, well, there was a change. Why was there a change? There must be some reason for that change. And so that can cause confusion. People may not understand the cause and effect there. So you want the interactions to feel natural, to feel like there's a flow. How do you do that? You sort of think about the psychology of it. Also, you want to test it. We talked about these, creating Figma paper prototypes. And part of that would be, if I was developing an app before I, went and had people started to code it, I would test the microinteractions and make sure people understand the cause and effect of things. You can see this all the time in websites, right? So it's like, let's say I go to Chabot's website and I'm going to deliberately make it smaller so that this little hamburger menu pops up. Do people get the cause and effect of clicking on the hamburger menu to getting these choices? Now, I think at this point in 2022, most people do, but that's something you'd want to test, especially if it's an interaction that's not as common. People may not understand that there's a cause and effect between clicking on the hamburger menu and getting this additional pop-up menu. You know what I mean? So that's kind of this keeping it natural. And that's something you're probably going to want to test, by basically, testing it with users. This is part of that research. You guys are doing research and the literal research of something, but this is where you would want to test maybe a prototype with someone and see how well it works with them. Another thing about microinteractions is the way I kind of define microinteractions is, imagine you download an app, okay, from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store or whatever. You want people to be able to use your app without needing a manual. You know what I mean? Like, you don't. So how do you want the experience to be as easy as possible without, it's sort of intuitive, right? Like, people go, oh, okay, that makes sense. I do this, and the thing that they think happens. You know what I mean? So part of that is using iconography or icons that make sense to people. So the icons you choose for an app or a website play a lot to people's understanding of what happens when you click on them. So, if you see this icon, let's say you download a new app and you see this icon, most of us at this point sort of understand that this is a map icon, meaning it's a geolocation of a place. So if I see this in an app, let's say it's an app for, I don't know, let's say it's a dating app. Well, I would probably assume that this is like where the person lives, or, I don't know, maybe it's like a geolocation for a product. Oh, maybe this is where they sell the product, whatever. If people see something like this, What's funny is this is an icon of an old fashioned floppy disk. I'm 40, and I remember having floppy disks as a kid. If you're below the age of 25, you've probably never seen a floppy disk in your life. But at this point, people still know what it is, which is this is a shortcut for the idea of saving. If you're in a program like Microsoft Word or any sort of application where you're saving data, like a text program like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or, Microsoft Excel or, whatever. If you see this icon, we go, oh, well, that means to save. You're saving your document, whatever it is, and you can come back to it later. So the idea is like, can people look at the icons and figure out what they do? So if you were in a text program, let's say I invent a new text program. It's called David, Mr. Hurwitch text application, and you saw this, what would you assume it does? Okay, I'm just going to give you, think about it for 30 seconds. What do you think this would do? Now, the answer is what these actually do is they do alignment. They align stuff to the left or right side. How do they show that? With icons, right? Or if you see these, you would probably assume it makes a bulleted list, right? With little bullets and things like that. So it's like, I didn't have to explain to you that, hey, this button aligns things to the left and this button, makes bullets. You kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, I've seen this before in other programs. I know what it does, Same thing here. Let's say, I don't even remember which video service I stole this from. But if you looked at this, let's say I invent a new streaming service. It's called David, David Plus TV, right? You load it in and you see this. What would you assume these buttons do? Well, you'd look at this and you'd say, well, in every other video program I've ever used, this is a play button, it plays the video. This is a sound button, it turns the volume up and down. This is closed captioning. These are usually for video options, usually it's for a higher resolution or a different aspect ratio. This is for full screen and so on and so on. So it's using the right icons isn't just about saving time. It's also that so we don't have to reteach people what everything is. People already know that this is a play button. Anyone who's ever, grown up in a modern society knows that, and has used digital devices knows that this is a play button. They're not gonna not know what that is. Maybe someone who, came from the past, from 100 years ago before, digital boom boxes and whatever made up, came around. But we got, anyone in 2022 would know that this is a play button. And then if you hit it, something is going to play, either audio or video or something like that. Okay. So what I would recommend you guys do is spend a couple minutes and look for some microinteractions on some applications. This could be an application like Photoshop, Illustrator. It could be Figma. It could be, you can open up your phone and, look for applications to play around with, like maybe, Nextdoor or TikTok or whatever. But think about what is the microinteraction. What does it look like in terms of its icon? I'm assuming a lot of them are going to be icons and they're not going to be written out as literal text. And then think about, what are the triggers? What is the literal trigger? What happens when you engage with the trigger? What kind of feedback do you get from that trigger? Is it a visual feedback? Is it an auditory feedback? It could even possibly be haptic feedback. And does that button always mean the same thing in all situations?